Before this story begins, remember one thing. The most dangerous person in a war is not always the general, the soldier, or the one holding the weapon. Sometimes it is the person everyone ignores. On Lyra 6, the Dominion thinks it has surrounded a helpless medical room. But General Raum is about to learn that silence does not always mean surrender.
The first mistake General Rahm made was assuming the medical moon had surrendered because its guns stayed silent. The second was assuming the woman on the emergency channel was important only because she had somehow found a working microphone. She appeared on every command screen at once, dressed in a gray maintenance uniform with a sanitation badge clipped crookedly to her chest, her hair tied back, her face calm in a way that made the alien officers laugh before they understood they should have been afraid. Behind Rahm, the bridge of the Dominion flagship burned with red tactical light. Around him, 47 warships held formation above Elera 6, their weapons locked on a moon filled with surgeons, refugees, wounded diplomats, sleeping children, and patients too fragile to survive evacuation. The Dominion had chosen the target carefully. A hospital world did not fight back. A neutral moon did not threaten retaliation. A station full of nurses, cleaners, cooks, technicians, and injured civilians was not supposed to become a battlefield. It was supposed to become leverage. The woman on the screen looked directly at Rahm as if she had heard every private calculation in his skull. Her name appeared beneath her face in the station's automatic identification script. Mara Venn, Sanitation Systems Supervisor, Night Rotation. Not Commander. Not Governor. Not Defense Coordinator. A cleaner. A human cleaner, standing somewhere inside a moon that had already been locked down, surrounded, and cut off from every rescue channel in the sector. Rahm stared at the identification tag, then laughed once through his teeth. Several of his officers followed because they knew what obedience sounded like. He leaned toward the screen, letting the camera catch the ridged scars along his jaw and the gold command plates fixed into the scales of his throat. He had broken fortress stations with fewer ships than this. He had watched planetary councils sign away mineral rights while trembling under less pressure. He had never negotiated with cleaning staff. "You are not authorized to speak for this facility," he said. Mara's expression did not change. That was the first thing his intelligence officer noticed and the last thing anyone on the bridge had time to dismiss. She did not plead, threaten, bargain, or perform outrage. She simply stood beneath pale utility lighting, with the faint sound of ventilation behind her, and answered in the flat, practical tone of someone reporting a blocked drain. "No," she said, "but I am authorized to keep it alive." The laughter faded unevenly. Rahm lifted one clawed hand and ordered security to trace the signal. The answer came back too quickly. The signal was not coming from command. It was not coming from emergency operations, engineering, medical control, or any room Dominion forces had marked as strategically relevant. It was coming from everywhere. Every corridor speaker, every patient monitor, every cleaning terminal, every waistline pressure gauge, and every sealed maintenance panel on Elera 6 was carrying her voice like the moon itself had decided to speak through one overlooked human. Then the flagship's lights flickered once. It was not dramatic. No explosion followed. No shield collapsed. No weapon fired. For half a second, the largest warship in the Dominion strike group simply blinked like an old machine remembering who had last repaired it. When the lights returned, every officer's private command display had gone black except for a single sentence written in clean human standard. "You should have asked who keeps this place alive." Rahm stood very still. In the silence that followed, someone far below the bridge reported that docking clamps had locked without command approval. Another voice said the prisoner transport elevators had stopped between floors. A third officer whispered that the oxygen routing map no longer matched the ship's architecture, which was impossible because warships did not rewrite themselves. Rahm turned back to the screen, but Mara Venn was gone. In her place was a live feed from the moon's lower maintenance ring, where a row of human workers in plain uniforms walked calmly through a corridor filled with Dominion soldiers. None of them ran. None of them looked afraid. Each carried something ordinary: a mop handle, a food crate, a medical battery, a toolbox, a folded blanket. The soldiers watched them pass and did not yet understand they were looking at the most dangerous people on the moon. Then every sealed door on HFY-SCIFI opened at once, except the ones leading to the children's ward. 3 weeks before the Dominion fleet arrived, HFY-SCIFI looked like the kind of place no empire bothered to fear. From orbit, the medical moon was a soft white crescent wrapped in blue atmospheric shields and slow-moving ambulance traffic, a sanctuary built on treaties older than most governments currently threatening to break them. Its landing bays took in the wounded from border conflicts, mining disasters, plague zones, failed colonies, and political assassinations that no one officially admitted had happened. Every wall carried the same neutral emblem. Every entrance displayed the same promise in 27 languages. No weapon would be raised here. No patient would be used as leverage. No war would be allowed inside. Mara Venn had cleaned blood out of those promises more times than she could count. She worked the night rotation because the moon was quieter then, though never truly quiet. The day staff called it peaceful. When the public corridors dimmed and the visiting officials returned to their embassy suites, but Mara knew the real sounds of HFY-SCIFI began after midnight. Vent fans strained above pediatric oxygen rooms. Old coolant pumps coughed behind oncology labs. Laundry drones jammed at the same corner every ninth cycle because someone in procurement had bought cheap wheel assemblies from a contractor who lied beautifully on invoices. Somewhere, always, a family was crying softly behind a privacy screen. Somewhere else, a surgeon was washing another person's life off their hands. Mara noticed all of it because that was the job. Not the job written on her badge, which said sanitation system supervisor and made alien administrators look through her as if she were part of the wall. The real job was keeping small failures from becoming large ones. A sticky door mattered if there was a fire. A mislabeled oxygen valve mattered if a patient stopped breathing. A waistline vibration mattered if it ran beneath a neonatal ward and connected to an emergency pressure shaft no one had inspected since before Mara was born. Important people rarely understood that civilization did not fail at the grand announcement. It failed at the ignored screw, the delayed repair, the form no one wanted to file. That was why Mara carried 3 tools no one questioned: a cleaning wand, a diagnostic slate, and a memory sharper than most command systems. She knew which diplomatic suites had private panic rooms installed without approval. She knew which security officers skipped rounds near the refugee wing. She knew the exact difference between the footsteps of an exhausted nurse and the footsteps of someone trying not to be heard. She knew, too, that the Varkal Dominion inspectors had stopped walking like inspectors 2 days after their arrival. They came first in small numbers, wearing legal authority like polished armor. Their uniforms were black with bronze throat plates, their voices trained to sound patient while implying punishment. They audited narcotic storage, refugee identity records, surgical plasma use, diplomatic visitor logs, and food distribution for families under protective care. They said the inspections were routine. They said neutrality required transparency. They said the Dominion had no hostile interest in HFY-SCIFI, which was the kind of sentence Mara had learned to distrust because honest people rarely spent that much effort explaining what they were not doing. The administrators believed them because administrators often confused paperwork with safety. Director Mail, who ran the Moon's Civilian Council, smiled too much during Dominion meetings and used words like cooperation, framework, and temporary inconvenience. He had never been cruel, only comfortable, and comfort made people eager to believe the strong would remain polite if offered enough procedure. When Mara reported that Dominion personnel had entered closed service corridors near oxygen reserve vaults, Mail thanked her for her diligence and reminded her that intergovernmental guests sometimes required unusual access. When she reported that 3 medical supply crates had been opened and resealed with military-grade tamper strips, he asked whether she was certain she had not mistaken inspection tape for security tape. Mara did not argue. She had learned years ago that being right too early sounded like being difficult. So she logged it instead. Her log was not dramatic. It contained dates, times, corridor numbers, pressure readings, badge scans, missing filters, unexplained access requests, and names spelled correctly because spelling mattered when someone later pretended a person had not been there. Other humans kept similar records without being told. Davi from kitchen inventory tracked ration diversions. Lynn from laundry tracked uniforms that did not match assigned personnel. Old Tomas in waste processing tracked mass fluctuations in sealed disposal containers because he said garbage never lied. Nurse Kellen tracked which Dominion guards watched the children's ward too long. None of them called it resistance. Resistance sounded loud. This was maintenance. The strange thing was that many non-humans saw pieces of the pattern and still dismissed the shape of it. HFY-SCIFI had too much suffering already. People protected themselves by naming danger as inconvenience until it physically touched them. But one person did not dismiss it. His name was Saleh, or a young Salafi trauma doctor with silver skin, long hands, and the haunted courtesy of someone who had spent too many shifts deciding which patient received the last regeneration bed. Saleh first noticed Mara because she appeared in places where access should have been impossible. He found her one night inside a sealed pediatric ventilation hub, standing ankle-deep in condensation, replacing a cracked pressure sensor with a part taken from an obsolete laundry unit. The official repair ticket for that sensor had been marked non-urgent. The ward it supported held 19 children with lung grafts. "How did you get in here?" Scylla asked, more startled than accusing. Mara tightened the sensor housing until the warning light turned green. Door was broken. It was sealed. That was the broken part. He waited for her to smile, but she was already wiping condensation from the pipe label so the next person would not have to guess which line carried oxygen and which carried sterilizing vapor. Scylla looked at her badge, then at the surrounding machinery. "Does command know you are altering critical systems?" "They know the ward is breathing," she said. "They like results better than explanations." That should have bothered him. Instead, he found himself following her repair with his eyes, recognizing the uncomfortable truth that the entire pediatric wing had stabilized because a sanitation supervisor had ignored the official chain of command. In the following days, Saleh began checking old maintenance records. At first he searched Mara's name out of professional concern. Then concern became disbelief. Then disbelief became something close to fear. 7 years of quiet corrections unfolded across his screen. Not heroic interventions. Not crisis declarations. Small adjustments made at impossible hours. A coolant surge corrected 12 minutes before it would have shut down surgical storage. A pressure imbalance fixed beneath refugee housing before anyone woke up dizzy. A corrupt evacuation map manually redrawn after a software update erased 3 lower-level exits. A food synthesizer contamination warning caught before it reached the immune-compromised ward. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became a hidden anatomy of survival, and Mara's name appeared again and again in the margins like a pulse no one had thought to measure. Saleh found other names too. Human names. Davi, Thomas, Kellen. People with low-ranking badges attached to repairs that had saved high-ranking lives. The Moon's official systems credited leadership, policy, and interspecies cooperation for HFY-SCIFI's perfect safety record. The maintenance archive told a different story. The Moon had survived because humans kept touching broken things before powerful people noticed they were broken. On the 5th night, Saleh found a restricted note buried inside an old evacuation file. It had no distribution list, no administrative approval, and no official category. It was written in Mara's plain maintenance shorthand, attached to a map of corridors long since marked obsolete. If they ever come for the patients, do not defend the station. Let them enter. Saleh read the line 3 times, each time feeling the same cold pressure settle behind his ribs. Outside his office, the Moon continued breathing through its vents and valves and hidden human repairs. Somewhere below, Mara Venn was beginning another night shift as if nothing had changed. Somewhere above, Dominion ships were requesting permission to dock under medical neutrality. And for the first time in his life, Saleh wondered whether HFY-SCIFI had been a sanctuary because war was forbidden there, or because someone very patient had already prepared for the day war ignored the sign on the door.
So far, Lyra 6 looks like a neutral medical moon. protected by treaties, symbols, and promises. But Mara Venn has spent years seeing what powerful people refuse to notice: broken walls, hidden access routes, Dominion inspectors moving like soldiers, and patients slowly becoming targets. Salon or has now discovered the terrifying truth hidden in Mara's old evacuation file. If the Dominion comes for the patients, they should be allowed inside. But why would a human cleaner invite the enemy into a hospital moon? The answer is about to turn the entire occupation into a trap.
The next Dominion vessel arrived without weapons, hot and without apology. It came in under the white transponder code of medical inspection, a polished black cruiser gliding through LRSIX's defensive shield as smoothly as a knife entering water. The Moon's command office approved its docking request in less than 3 minutes because the clearance papers were flawless, the signatures were legal, and the Dominion ambassador had attached 17 paragraphs reminding everyone that neutrality survived only when all parties respected formal process. Director Mail praised the transparency of the visit in a station-wide bulletin. Mara Venn read the bulletin while kneeling beneath a leaking sterilizer line and saved a copy without comment. By noon, Dominion personnel had doubled in every public corridor. They wore inspection bands over their armor now, thin silver strips that turned soldiers into auditors for anyone desperate enough to believe labels. They moved through wards with tablets held high and voices kept low, asking questions about patient origins, diplomatic protections, surgical dependencies, and evacuation priority. They never asked which children were sick. They asked which children mattered. That was the detail Nurse Kellen logged after one guard paused beside an oxygen crib and checked the family name against a political registry instead of a medical chart. Mara saw the pattern widen in silence. The Dominion was not studying LRA-6 as a hospital. It was studying LRA-6 as a pressure point. The Moon treated the wounded relatives of border ministers, the hidden heirs of merchant clans, retired commanders too injured to return home, scientists protected by asylum law, and refugees whose deaths would ignite public outrage across 7 minor governments. A warship could destroy a city and create enemies. A medical moon could be seized and turned into a bargaining table. Every patient was a hostage waiting for the correct announcement. She took that conclusion to Director Mail with a folder thick enough to make his aides nervous. Access violations. Supply irregularities. Dominion routes plotted against oxygen reserves and patient clusters. Unmarked cargo unloaded near old service junctions. Security loops that skipped exactly 34 seconds whenever Dominion officers crossed into restricted zones. Mail listened behind his polished desk, hands folded, face arranged into institutional concern. When she finished, he sighed as if she had brought him a plumbing inconvenience during a budget meeting. "You are asking me to accuse a sovereign military delegation of preparing an illegal occupation," he said. "I'm asking you to check why their signal suppressors are stored behind pediatric ventilation," Mara replied. Mail's expression tightened at the bluntness, but he did not open the folder again. He spoke of diplomatic consequences, chain of command, and the dangers of panic. He reminded her that she was not trained in interstellar security analysis. He said the Moon had survived for decades because it trusted agreements, not suspicion. Mara looked past him through the office glass to where a Dominion officer was politely photographing the emergency evacuation board. "Agreements are useful," she said. "So are doors that lock from both sides." That was the closest she came to warning him. When Mail dismissed her, she left the folder anyway. His aide placed it in the secondary review tray, where documents went when they were too uncomfortable to ignore and too inconvenient to read. Or found Mara an hour later in the East Laundry Exchange, sorting sealed linens beside a pressure panel that should not have been open. He had not slept properly since finding the restricted note. The words had followed him from ward to ward, turning every routine sound into a question. Let them enter. It was either madness or strategy, and the more he learned about human maintenance behavior, the less confident he felt calling anything madness. "I found something you wrote," he said. Mara did not look up. "You found several thousand things I wrote." This one said not to defend the station. Her hands paused only long enough to mark one linen crate with a blue sterilization tag. That file was restricted. I am a trauma physician with emergency access. That is not the same as permission. No, Saleh admitted. It is not. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of laundry conveyors carrying sheets toward wards full of bodies that trusted clean fabric more than politics. Mara closed the pressure panel and turned the manual latch twice, though one turn would have been enough. Saleh noticed that too. She did many things twice when people were watching, as if hiding the one action that mattered inside the ordinary rhythm of unnecessary care. If the Dominion attacks, why would you let them in? He asked. Mara studied him then, and Saleh had the uncomfortable sense that he was not being judged for loyalty but for usefulness under pressure. Because stopping them at the shield tells them what we can defend, she said. Letting them enter tells us what they came to take. It was the first real answer she had given him, and it was worse than silence. It implied the Dominion's arrival was not the beginning of danger but the test that would reveal its shape. Saleh wanted to ask who we meant. Human staff? A hidden defense cell? The entire moon? Before he could speak, Mara handed him a folded paper map of the old laundry corridors. If the children's ward loses power, take them through the blue route, she said. Not the green. The green looks faster. Why not the green? Because someone with a weapon will think so too. Saleh unfolded the map and saw routes that did not exist on official evacuation diagrams. Narrow service corridors behind sterilization chambers. Waste heat tunnels below the rehabilitation pools. A forgotten linen lift that connected surgical recovery to an old atmospheric intake well. Someone had mapped the moon beneath the moon, an entire second hospital hidden inside the spaces administrators called obsolete. Some markings were years old. Some had been updated that morning. His mouth went dry. How long have you been preparing this? Mara picked up her cleaning wand. Long enough to know we are late. The first true sign of the Dominion's intention came that evening disguised as a supply failure. 3 pallets of pediatric antiviral compounds were denied release from customs hold pending verification of origin. A surgical plasma shipment was redirected to a Dominion cruiser for contamination testing. 2 refugee nutrition banks were sealed because their inventory codes did not match newly imposed documentation rules. None of these actions killed anyone immediately. That was why they were chosen. Cruelty moved carefully at first when it wanted law to hold the door open. By night cycle, families began whispering in the corridors. Doctors recalculated treatment windows. Nurses traded doses between wards with the quiet shame of people forced to choose which innocent body would suffer first. Dominion inspectors watched the anxiety spread and recorded it as compliance pressure. Mara watched the inspectors watching and added their names to a file that did not exist in any official archive. Then old Tomas from waste processing sent her a single image. It showed the inside of a sealed disposal container unloaded from the new Dominion cruiser. The manifest labeled it as sterile protective gear. The mass reading said otherwise. Inside were compact military signal suppressors packed in foam, each stamped with a battlefield control mark. Enough to silence every emergency transmitter on the moon. Mara forwarded the image to 3 humans, 2 non-human nurses, 1 terrified shuttle dispatcher, and saw. She did not include Director Mail. A minute later, every human maintenance worker on Alara 6 began changing shift assignments without appearing to change anything important. Kitchen staff volunteered for late delivery routes. Sanitation teams requested filter checks near communications junctions. Laundry workers moved extra carts into pediatric recovery. Dispatch clerks delayed non-essential departures and quietly topped off fuel on ambulances marked out of service. To the Dominion, it looked like fatigue. To Scylla, who had started seeing the hidden pattern, it looked like a body taking a breath before impact. At 3:17 station time, the moon's external communication array suffered a minor diagnostic glitch. It lasted 9 seconds. The official system marked it as harmless interference. During those 9 seconds, a compressed data burst left HFY-SCIFI through an obsolete maintenance telemetry channel that had once been used to report sewage pressure to a contractor that no longer existed. The burst contained Dominion cargo images, patient risk lists, corridor maps, and one sentence of human standard address to an unknown recipient beyond the shield. "They are here for the helpless." Saleh did not learn about the burst until later. At that moment, he was standing in the children's ward, watching Nurse Kellen tape colored animal stickers onto portable oxygen masks so frightened patients would think they were part of a game. Mara passed the ward entrance, pushing a cleaning cart with one squeaking wheel. She did not slow down, but every child near the door looked up as if they knew her. One small human girl with graft tubes under her nose lifted a hand. Mara lifted 2 fingers from the cart handle in return, and the girl smiled. That tiny smile did more to frighten Saleh than the warship in Docking Bay 4. It made the coming violence personal. It made neutrality feel like paper held over flame. It made him understand that Mara was not protecting a facility, a treaty, or a political symbol. She was protecting breathing people with names. 3 hours later, the Dominion ambassador requested an emergency meeting with Director Mail. 5 minutes after that, Dominion soldiers took positions outside command, pharmacy, docking control, communications, and the children's ward. Their weapons remained lowered. Their inspection bands remained visible. Their officer in charge smiled as he told the nearest nurse there was no cause for alarm. Deep in the lower maintenance ring, Mara stopped beside an old wall panel no one had opened in years. Behind it waited manual controls that had been removed from every modern station diagram. She placed one hand on the first lever and listened as boots moved through the hospital above her. Then the moon-wide speakers clicked once, and Director Mail's strained voice announced that HFY-SCIFI was entering a temporary security partnership with the Varkal Dominion. The announcement did not sound like surrender because Director Mail had been trained to make surrenders sound administrative. His voice moved through HFY-SCIFI with the careful softness of institutional failure, asking all staff and patients to remain calm while Dominion security personnel assisted with temporary stabilization measures. He said no one was in danger. He said cooperation would ensure continued care. He said the moon's neutrality remained intact, though the words came out thin and breathless, as if even he could hear the lie forming around them. On the upper levels, people froze in the way civilians froze when violence arrived wearing official language. Surgeons stopped mid-instruction. Nurses looked toward sealed medication cabinets and counted what they had already hidden in their pockets. Families pulled children closer without knowing where to run. Dominion soldiers stepped into intersections with weapons angled down, polite enough to delay panic and visible enough to create it. Their officer repeated the same phrase in every ward. This was a protective action. The patients were safe as long as everyone remained reasonable. Mara Venn stood alone below all of it with her hand still resting on the first manual lever. The lower maintenance ring did not receive the announcement cleanly. It arrived broken by static, filtered through pipes, bulkheads, and old speakers that had outlived 3 software upgrades. That made it sound older than Mail, older than the Dominion, older than the treaty painted across the moon's public entrances. It sounded like every warning humanity had ever ignored until someone finally touched the stove. She did not pull the lever. Not yet. That was the part no one above would have understood. Anger wanted motion. Fear wanted motion. Pride wanted motion most of all. But Mara had spent her life studying systems, and systems punished early hands. A valve turned too soon could burst a line. A door sealed too soon could trap the wrong people. A warning shouted too soon could teach the enemy what mattered. So she stood in the dim maintenance alcove, listening to the boots overhead, and waited for the Dominion to show her which lives they valued as leverage. They showed her quickly. The first seizure team entered neonatal recovery at 3:42, not to harm anyone, but to place 2 armed soldiers beside the oxygen cradles. The second took control of pharmacy storage and began marking life-saving compounds as strategic assets. The third entered diplomatic trauma and moved 3 unconscious patients into rooms with external cameras. Every action was precise, legalistic, and monstrous in the way only carefully planned cruelty could be. They were not killing the helpless. They were arranging the helpless where fear could see them. Saleh or watched the pharmacy doors close while holding a tray of medication that would now require military approval to deliver. A Dominion soldier glanced at the tray and asked for patient priority codes. Saleh gave them because refusing would cost lives faster than obedience. As the soldier scanned the first vial, Saleh's wrist slate vibrated once with a message from an unknown internal source. Blue route active only when lights fall twice. He did not need a signature. He knew. Across Elera, 6, similar messages appeared where humans would see them and Dominion systems would dismiss them as maintenance chatter. Kitchen staff received revised delivery paths. Laundry carts were reassigned to corridors near patient overflow. Waste processing was instructed to run a pressure purge nobody had ordered in 4 years. Shuttle dispatch received a false coolant alert on 3 out-of-service ambulance craft, which meant someone would have to inspect them, fuel them, and leave their access panels open. Everything looked small enough to ignore. That was the genius of it. The moon did not begin resisting. It began rearranging itself. The Dominion commander on site, Colonel Vare, noticed only the absence of panic and interpreted it incorrectly. Humans lined up when ordered for identification. They stood beside nurses, cooks, clerks, janitors, porters, and lift operators, faces tired but calm. Some carried tool bags because they had been interrupted at work. Some carried food crates because abandoning patient meals would have been irresponsible. One old woman from Linen Control carried a bundle of folded blankets and scolded a Dominion guard for stepping on a sterile corner. The guard laughed. The old woman apologized with perfect politeness, then placed the blanket bundle exactly where it blocked a wall camera's view of a service hatch. Colonel Vare walked the holding corridor with satisfaction hardening his posture. This, to him, was how occupations succeeded. No heroic resistance. No armed defenders. No messy firefight that could complicate the legal narrative. Just compliance, confusion, and a population that understood power when it saw it. He stopped in front of Mara, who had joined the line after leaving the lower ring by a route no sensor recorded. Her badge identified her as sanitation. Her face revealed nothing. "You will report all access codes related to environmental control," Vare said. "I do not have all of them," Mara replied. He smiled. "Then you will report the ones you have. That would take time. Time is available." Mara looked toward the far end of the corridor, where a frightened child on a rolling bed was being pushed past 2 soldiers toward a camera-monitored ward. The child had colored animal stickers on her oxygen mask. Sir walked beside her with one hand on the rail, his expression controlled only because patients needed him controlled. Mara's eyes returned to Vare. "Yes," she said. "It is." Vare mistook that for submission. He ordered her taken to environmental operations under guard. The moment she stepped into the lift, it descended 2 floors below its selected destination, paused, rose 1 floor, stopped again, and opened into a corridor filled with cleaning drones moving at regulation speed. Nothing attacked the guards. Nothing looked hostile. But the delay lasted 48 seconds, and during those 48 seconds, 3 laundry carts crossed an intersection above them, 2 nurses moved portable oxygen units into the children's ward, and old Tomas opened a waste heat channel that had not been used since the moon's original construction. The first visible malfunction occurred 11 minutes later. A Dominion checkpoint door began opening slowly, taking 30 full seconds to complete a cycle that normally took 3. Soldiers cursed at it. A technician scanned it and found no fault. Then a private Dominion food dispenser produced a bowl of gray nutrient paste so bitter that the officer who tasted it spat across the floor. 5 minutes after that, a prisoner transport elevator stopped 1 level short of the holding zone and cheerfully announced that the passengers had reached hydroponics. No one had been harmed. No asset had been destroyed. The occupation had simply become irritating. That irritation mattered. Irritated soldiers made sloppy choices. Sloppy choices revealed priorities. Priorities became maps. From environmental operations, Mara provided partial codes exactly as requested. Each code worked. Each code opened a real subsystem. Each subsystem was old, patched, cross-linked, manually rerouted, and dependent on maintenance notes written by people Dominion intelligence had categorized as low-value labor. Vere's technicians tried to build control from the fragments and found themselves drowning in inherited human improvisation. Every solution led to another question. Every override required a physical inspection. Every physical inspection moved Dominion personnel deeper into corridors Mara wanted them to enter. Then the first real Dominion mistake happened. A young soldier in the refugee ward shoved a human orderly aside hard enough that the man struck a surgical tray and fell. The sound carried farther than it should have. Metal hitting floor. A patient crying out. A guard laughing because he thought the moment was small. Every human worker on HFY-SCIFI stopped moving for 1 second.
Dominion has finally crossed the line. They entered HFY-SCIFI pretending to protect it, seized the pharmacy, surrounded the children's ward, turned helpless patients into leverage, and even showed a human orderly to the floor. But Mara Venn and the workers of the moon did not panic. They watched, they measured, they waited. Every delay, every broken door, every laundry cart, every hidden route was part of something larger. And now, with 2 words on every human risk slate, the moon itself is ready to answer.
Only one. Then they continued exactly as before. Colonel Vere did not notice. Sala did, and the stillness chilled him more than shouting would have. It passed like a shadow beneath a door, silent and deliberate. A decision had moved through the humans without a visible signal. Something had been endured. Something had been measured. Something had been added to a column whose total no one outside them could see. Mara saw the message appear while standing between 2 armed guards beneath the environmental operations display. She did not smile. She did not lift her head. She simply entered one final code into the console, a code Vere had demanded and his technicians believed would expand Dominion access to the moon's oxygen network. For half a second, the screen accepted it. Then every sealed door on HFY-SCIFI opened at once, except the ones protecting the children's ward.
And that is the lesson General Round, Colonel Weir, and the Dominion never understood. A hospital moon was not weak because its weapons stayed silent. It was strong because ordinary people had spent years keeping it alive. Mara Venn was not a commander, not a governor, not a decorated warrior. She was a cleaner who knew every wall, every corridor, every broken system, and every life depending on them. In the end, humanity's strength was not just firepower. It was memory, patience, maintenance, and the terrifying power of people who protect the helpless when everyone else looks away.